Hi, everyone. I'm Helen. I am going to be talking about how I made a map out of glass today. I am a student at UW-Madison. This has nothing to do with that. All right. So here's a brief overview of what I'm going to be talking about in this presentation. I'm primarily going to focus on the process of making a stained glass piece, but this map did take me through the full range of human emotions, so that'll be sprinkled in a little bit. I want to start by telling you about my friend Natsuko Suzuki, and I'm sharing this because the motivation for most of my artwork is to have fun and share it with my friends. Since around 22, Natsuko and I have had a standing art night every week with a few other friends. This started because we all liked drawing comics and wanted to practice a little bit more, but the ritual has evolved. Sometimes we make food and just lay on the floor. Other times we watch bad TV and knit, and sometimes we help each other craft scary emails or figure out complicated health insurance questions. This ritual has gotten me through grad school in one piece, and it's given me a supportive space to try new things creatively. One thing that I adore about my friend Natsuko, and what I've learned from her, is her audacity when it comes to the arts. I would describe her mindset as, why not me? Why can't I do that? She doesn't get intimidated by a new craft, and she just goes all in. For example, she learned to knit a few years ago just to create this gorgeous Scandinavian sweater, and it turned out great. A few years ago, she decided to learn how to make stained glass. And once she got the hang of it, she taught me how to do it too. This picture on the right is my first stained glass piece. And as you can see, it's 3 pieces total. That took me about 7 hours to do. And so in the spirit of Natsuko, after completing that tiny piece, I thought, why wouldn't a stained glass map be really cool? And why can't I make a stained glass map? So that idea kind of rolled around in my head for about a year, during which I gained 0 skills to be able to make that happen. And then the call for NACIS maps went around, and I decided it was time. I went through several iterations of ideas about what to actually map using glass. I briefly considered a choropleth map, but I don't really vibe with those that much. I thought they would look cool, but I decided not to go all in on that. I wanted something with more organic shapes, which now, having done it, I understand that that's not what a stained glass maker should be thinking about. It should be about straight lines. But luckily, I wasn't a stained glass maker when I started. So let's get into the process, if I can figure out technology. All right. So as soon as I made my decision to map the beautiful lakes around Madison, which I enjoy, I started running into problems. As is typically the case, it was kind of hard to find data, especially for lake depths. It's easier to find bathymetry, I found, at least publicly accessible data. The one digitized lake depth map data set I could find was around $4,000, and I have yet to win the lottery, so I did not purchase that. Instead, I ended up using these survey maps from 1981 by the Wisconsin DNR. So I took those maps, they were across multiple pages, and I georeferenced them in ARC, and then I ended up deciding how to create the different intervals. Thank you. And I decided to show the depths at 20-foot intervals, and that decision was kind of around when I started to realize that my grand vision of having like an accurate map or like a useful map out of stained glass might not come to fruition. Nevertheless, I still didn't really generalize the shapes or smooth the shapes of the depth lines that I ended up tracing at 20-foot intervals. And that's because I I didn't understand my own limitations, and that was probably a good thing. I didn't really understand what I was getting into. So how do you actually make stained glass? The first step is to cut the glass. Making stained glass is, when we talk about it, it's kind of a misnomer. Most people who make stained glass buy the glass already stained. So I found a bunch of blue glass at the UW-Madison art studio, which is free for students and grad students, and I got started. I printed out a couple of copies of my map, and I cut up every single section and outline them on my blue glass. I had to decide like what the color gradient was going to be, and that was a little difficult given that there were like uneven amounts of different types of glass, and things look really different when they're opaque versus transparent, if they're in front of a light source or not, which I wasn't actually thinking about that much, and you can see in the final result. But in order to cut the glass, all you need to do is make a scratch on it using something called a scorer. And then you use something called a line breaker, so you press the glass right over the area where you made that scratch, and it breaks. It's super satisfying. Highly recommend this part of the process. I did get pretty ambitious in terms of what I thought I would be able to cut in the glass. As you can see, there are like tons of squiggles on those pieces, and then pretty much immediately with the first cut, I was like breaking the outlines I had made. And because I didn't want to buy more glass, I decided to just roll with it. So this is an example of how different the end result turned out to be. This is a section of Lake Mendota that's on Picnic Point, a lovely place if you've ever visit Madison to go walk. So this tiny section here ended up being that tiny little like wiggly line, and in the final piece, it turned into these three kind of thicker crescent pieces. So the material itself was limiting, but I do like the end result. I think it looks nice. So you would think that the most dangerous part of making stained glass is cutting the glass. However, I found myself getting a lot more wounds in the grinding stage. So the second step after you cut is to grind down your glass so that you have a nice rough edge that won't cut your hand when you touch it. In this process, though, there are often like pieces of glass flying off the grinder. I highly recommend using not medical surgical gloves to do this. Use something more substantial than that. I had a few pictures I couldn't use because I had blood on the glass. As I grind my glass, you're pretty limited by the radius of the grinder itself. So that was another challenge that I started running into. So at this point, I stopped really using the outline that I began with, and I start just trying to work with the actual glass pieces that I have, trying to make sure that they fit together in such a way that I'll be able to solder them together later on. All right, so the next stage after grinding the glass is to cover the edges in copper foil tape. You do this so that the solder will have some sort of metal to bond to. And this, I would say, is the most fun, relaxing part of making a stained glass piece. You can listen to a book, you can watch a TV show as you rub on the copper tape. It is time intensive, but it's worth it. And I like how it looks with the copper tape and without the solder. This is actually like my favorite, aesthetically, my favorite part of the process. I always get a little bit sad when it's time to solder. I'll also say that putting together the pieces again and again, because I was doing this in different locations. I was doing it on campus. I was putting it together at home. I was putting it together at Natsuko's house because she has a nice soldering iron. And doing that took a couple of hours every time to fit it together. It's a puzzle that each time I did it, depending on like how much space I left in the gaps, it came together a little bit differently, and I eventually just came to be at peace with that, and the fact that it would just be how it is the last time I put it together. So now is the fun part, soldering. In order to solder is an alloy, so it's a metal with a low melting point, and it binds to other metals. And in order to solder in like a nice, smooth way, it's important to use something called flux, which is essentially a chemical corrosive agent. It's like a cleaning agent. So you paint it onto the copper sections, and it gets rid of all the dust and debris so that the solder can go on there nice and smooth. So you use something, it looks a little bit like a wand, that soldering iron. You just dab it onto your little line of solder, put it on the flux, and then go over it with the iron until it's smooth. It's pretty satisfying. It's also very toxic, so you need to make sure you're wearing your PPE. And then the most exciting part of the process for me was being able to actually lift it up and seeing all the pieces together. I'm not going to have to put them together again. It was very exciting. So around this stage, I realized that the edges of the map just don't fully align, and I had to decide if I wanted to have it be fully a rectangle, or if I just wanted to have a map that had some like gaps in the edges. I decided to go to Home Depot to see if I could find some nice U-channel so it would cover the edges of the map and kind of cover up its imperfections. When I was there, I found myself in the lighting aisle. And I always do that. Whenever I go to Home Depot, I'm suddenly in the lighting aisle. I don't know what brought me there. I think it's my moth brain. And I realized that this panel is the start of a light fixture. And I wanted to have like a fun light behind it whenever I show it to people. So that's when I bought my $9 party light at Home Depot. And I recommend buying one that's higher quality. It'll last longer, but it added like a nice flare and kind of evoked like the 80s. I would assume. I wasn't there, but I thought that would be like a nice throwback to where I got the data from. Yeah. So then this is my final map. I guess a few lessons. If I were to do this again, I would smooth my lines a lot more. I would use more generalization. I would try to let go a little bit earlier, getting sad about when the glass breaks. That's just gonna happen. That's what glass does. Maybe this piece will break someday, probably. But using it, turning it into a new design it was a nice experience. Yeah, also getting used to like having some gaps in the solder. I was pretty sad about them for a while, and I was like, maybe I won't even bring this map to NACIS. But I had a friend that was like, oh, I thought you chose to do that. So that helped me reframe it as kind of more just like an artistic, natural thing that can happen. Yeah, so that's how I made my stained glass map. Thank you, everybody. Any questions? We'll go back to my map. I feel like there should be.
No,
It's back there.
Questions? Yeah, Michelle. Can you show the map again?
Yeah.
I'm not sure why I'm approaching you. I don't have a microphone to give you.
Yes, certainly. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, Helen, do you have thoughts on what you
Thoughts on my next project? Like a stained glass project? Okay, well, currently my next project is like a visualization of all of the books that I read in the last year, and it's kind of like it's gonna be just a bunch of different visual variables like in a grid for all of the books of the last year, and just like how I like them. Did I cry? Did I laugh? Did it make me think? But yeah, that's what I'm working on right now. So I like variety. Cool. Thank you.